Now, how much should a person spend on an instrument?
You're going to have to pay me $1 million.
No, really.
Sorry. $100 billion.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Ask Olaf the Violin Maker. So today I'm going to talk about the different kind of instruments you can get, from the beginner types of instruments to good, intermediate and professional. Now, how much should a person spend on an instrument? When people ask me that question, I usually just say, yeah, you should start around maybe $1-2 million. Yeah, maybe 3 million. But no, really. So where do I start? So it's really up to the person to kind of buy an instrument, firstly, that works really well for their playing, but then also an instrument they feel really good about. So some part of an instrument can be an emotional part, you know, that like you might buy into history or a particular maker. And then the other part, of course, it has to sound fantastic. How much should a player spend on an instrument? We know that $100 is too little. Cheap violin, good cheap violin. It's only 99 Australian dollars. That's 65 US dollars. Bargain! And, you know, we're probably not going to spend millions. So today I'm going to focus on the kinds of instruments you can get between about $500 and about $10,000. And I'm going to talk to you about all the differences. And there are big differences. Obviously, some of the differences are going to be in the sound quality and the setup, especially on the lower priced instruments. You'll find it a lot harder to find a better setup because the cost is just so low that you know, people can't always spend the amount of time they want to get an instrument playing well. I'm quite fussy on my beginner instruments, but and I don't sell the really cheap ones because I just don't think they should be played. But of course, you know, I mean, you know, some people's budget just doesn't reach that much, and what's really important is that you get to play. And so sometimes second-hand instruments can work out well too. You have to see if they're actually well set up or if they sound good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the different kinds of instruments you can get. Now, obviously, I'll start from low to high. So the first price class you can get are the beginner instruments. So these are the $500 to about $1,200 instruments. So with those instruments, quite often the materials aren't going to be as good. Most of the time they're gonna be varnished with an artificial varnish, which is very hardy, but it also affects the sound negatively. Some of them might have been varnished with spirit varnish, but quite often not with the really high quality oil varnishes or the high quality spirit varnishes. So $500 instruments. My $500 instruments are the Vivace instruments. They're good beginner instruments. Today I'll probably talk about a lot of the instruments that I get in or that I sell because, you know, they're my examples. I'm fairly picky about instruments, so I always try and get the best possible instrument in a price class, you know, to give players real value. But you know, there are lots of shops around the world that have similarly priced instruments. What's important is that you make sure that you love the instrument, that it sounds good, that it's well set up, and that it's easy to play. So this is the kind of instrument you should be able to expect for around $500. So this is like my Vivace instrument. The timber's actually quite nice. The varnish is an artificial varnish. It's very hard to get lower priced instruments with a good really high level varnish. These instruments, you know, they have a good, decent sound. My Vivace violins have a very clear sound, which I think is really important for beginners. I'm fussy on the setup as well. I make sure that it has a good quality bridge, that the fingerboard is planed, that the pegs work well. I put on a nice set of strings. So in this case, it's Tonica strings by Perastro. But there are other good quality strings. I do not use the basic Chinese strings. I haven't found a set of Chinese strings to sound really good, but you know, might be proven wrong one day. But up till this moment, no strings that I've found actually have a nice clear tone and are really true. And the sound post is adjusted well, so nice and easy to play. So great honest tone, and it'll do well for beginners. And the next kind of instrument would be probably closer to about $1,200, and at that point you should be able to expect a natural varnish of some kind, maybe usually a spirit varnish, and some slightly better timbers and possibly slightly better sound. Also, you should be able to expect some better quality bridges and better quality strings. My Garibaldi instrument is a good example for that. Unfortunately, it's sold out at the moment. It's a little bit popular. I do have one of the Garibaldi Masters, but it's in the slightly higher price class, so I won't show you right now. Now, the next level of instrument would be from about $1,000 to $3,000. So the beginner instruments, somewhere between $500 and $1,200. You can get instruments that are cheaper than $500, and occasionally you might get one that works quite well. I haven't found any that I'm really happy with, and because I'm passionate about the way the way people should start on instruments, my bottom line is actually 630, so it's around $500 and I don't go below that. So the next kind of range is the intermediate instruments, and we're kind of talking maybe between $1,000 and $4,000. And there you should be able to get some nicer made instruments. There are a few European instruments you can get at that price class. A lot of the European instruments use a bit of machinery just to keep the labor costs down. There's a lot of Chinese instruments in that price class, and those instruments they're usually mostly handmade. A good example is my Pierre Lamont violin. Yeah, that's this instrument, and it's actually a really beautifully made instrument. Has good timbers, has a really nice tone. I'm not going to talk a huge amount about tones of instruments today. I'll talk more about the workmanship and things like that. So you definitely want to get an instrument that has a nice tone. That's very important. Okay. This has it has a bit of a sweetness to it as well, which I really like about the Pierre Lamont. The Pierre Lamont and the Pierre Lamont Masters instruments are somewhere between the 1,800 Australian dollars and about 2,500 Australian dollars. And so the difference here is that they've actually got a really nice, these instruments already have an oil varnish, but you can get some nice instruments with spirit varnish as well. The materials are a little bit better, and also the workmanship is a lot more refined. There are other brands as well, like any number of brands from J. Heidi, Gill, Ilna, You know, there's a whole number of brands in that kind of price range where you can get some nicer made instruments. If you're looking for an instrument, find one that you love the sound of. It has to be well set up, so make sure it's set up by a luthier. So some of those instruments actually get sold through bigger music shops, and they may not have that luthier set up. So make sure the instruments are actually well set up by a luthier. And all those instruments, the Chinese ones are definitely fully handmade. Some of the European ones will use some machinery to do some of the work, but the finishing is usually all hand finished anyway. Now the next level of instrument is going to the good intermediate instrument to low-end professional. So these instruments go from about $3,000 to about $10,000 Australian. So I'm talking about maybe $2,500 US to about $8,000 US. And there we get a much different range. So there are some nice European instruments that you can get. There are some really nice Chinese instruments you can get. Some of the workmanship on some of the Chinese instruments are really masterful. For example, my Giuseppe Ziardo instrument is superbly finished. This is an instrument that I design and I have some of my makers make for me in a workshop. It's fully made from European timber. The workmanship is just exceptional, and it's absolutely beautiful sounding. You know, like I've heard instruments that are valued $15,000 to $20,000 that don't sound as good as the Giuseppe Ziardo violin. That's close to 7,000 Australian dollars, and it has a really beautiful tone as well. So really nice tone. The other example is the Salvatore Lombardi instrument, which also has a really beautiful sound, and I just love the finish of the instrument. It just has that beautiful Italian style varnish. It's an oil varnish. It's made by the people that make the instruments for me, and it's a very authentic Italian, like a 400-year-old Italian recipe, and then also the timber they choose is absolutely gorgeous. But there are lots of other instruments you can get in that price class that are new. So like I said, there's European instruments like German, Romanian, Eastern European. There are also some of the Chinese instruments, and you can get some really good sounding and good value instruments. Also, in that price range, you're going to start being able to get some antique instruments. So there are some old German, like Eastern German instruments, Bohemian instruments that you can get in that price class. Now, I don't recommend buying these instruments as, from a second-hand store or something like that. I would buy one of those instruments fully set up by a luthier so that they work at their highest level, because a lot of those instruments had a lot of faults, and it's really important that that everything's right about those instruments. So a good example here would be something like the Hermann Dölling. There are a lot of other instruments. This is a Hermann Dölling violin. So it's over 100 years old, and a really nice instrument. So that's a German brand. There are a lot of old German instruments that actually have no brand. They're Stradivarius copies. I made a film about finding a Stradivarius.
I have a genuine Stradivarius violin. We found it in my grandfather's cupboard after he passed away.
Yes, so look that one up. You can also get some nice French instruments made in the Mirecourt area. And a good example would be, say, the Colong Maison, which is... Colong Maison was a well-known French maker in the late 1800s, early 1900s. and those instruments can go, it depends, for between sort of 8,000 to 12,000 Australian dollars, which is kind of in the 7,000 to 9,000 US dollars. And the nice thing about buying an antique instrument is that you're buying an old instrument. It's got history, it has a story. Slightly problematic thing that can happen when you buy the older instruments is that they may have some little faults. So firstly, they may have had some cracks that developed over the years. I mean, if they're well repaired, it's not a real issue. Some of the neck heights might not be right, the bass bar mightn't be right. Also, the sound has a big variance to it. And so a thing that I really like about some of the newer instruments that I design is that you're going to get something that's consistent. It has it has a 3-year guarantee, but I know those instruments will last for will last for 100, 200, or 300 years because they're well made. But you don't have that story. You with those instruments, you're basically creating your own story with the instrument. And so some of the older instruments may have been through various families. And they have some real history, and also value wise, some of those older instruments can retain their value better. But in the end, the most important thing is that you enjoy playing an instrument. And for you to enjoy playing an instrument, it's so important that the instrument works well and sounds good. So I wouldn't discount old or new. Just when it comes time to trying instruments, I would try old and new. Obviously, not everyone has the luxury of being able to go out and buy an instrument in a shop, especially at the moment. So you would really have to make sure you buy it of a trusted maker. And I personally, on my own instruments, I always put a 3-year warranty because they are such good instruments. I know they're gonna last for many years. So what kind of instrument should you get? What's important, obviously, if you can spend a bit more, you're definitely going to get better instruments. And, if you can get up to the sort of $3,000 to $5,000 range, you're going to be able to get an instrument that is really well made. They're almost, they're extremely well made and can compete with other instruments that are close to, $20,000 or more. But then again, if your budget is limited, just get the best you can get for your budget. You can always upgrade later if that's something you want to do, or, just keep that instrument. But, if your budget isn't so limited, get something that you're going to love playing, that you really enjoy. I mean, if you play an instrument you're going to enjoy playing, first you're going to practice more, you're going to enjoy playing more, the instrument will work well for you, and you're going to progress a lot faster because, you're just getting so much joy out of the instrument. It does make a big difference. And then, of course, the sound is super important. You need to have an instrument with a sound that you love and a sound that kind of matches your character a little bit. Like some people like a really deep sound, some like a sort of a sweeter sound, some people like a brighter sound. And so it's really important that you find an instrument that really resonates with you and that really becomes your form of expression. Anyway, I hope you've gotten some insights into the different kinds of instruments you can get. I didn't go up to the $1 million route because I didn't think that too many viewers were going to rush out and buy $1 million instrument.
$1 million!
You can still do that, and I should be able to help with that, but this kind of, that price class between $500 and $10,000, I thought there's a price class that a lot of people end up buying instruments in, and you can find some wonderful instruments in that price class. And I'm forever researching and trying to find the best kind of value instruments, and it's amazing what you can get. But be warned, There's also some real trash out there, and there are charlatans that are going to tell you that a certain instrument is, is really valuable and might even have a fake label or something like that and sell it for a lot of money, and it ends up being something different. I had one case of someone coming in. Luckily, they came in and had the instruments checked in my shop. They were offered 4 instruments, and each of those 4 instruments had fake labels in them and were priced close to $10,000 when most of them were worth somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. So that kind of stuff can happen. So work with someone who's super reputable. Work with a luthier, one that understands the needs of string players. Not necessarily, there's some self-trained people out there too, and some people, get to a really high level, but just make sure that the setup is really good, that the instrument is really well maintained, and that you get something beautiful that you love. Anyway, that's me for today. If you like the video, click the like button, subscribe to my channel, and click on the little bells so you find out every time I post a new video. Thanks for watching. See ya!